All right. Thank you guys for joining us for our Creating a Training Plan presentation. We're going to kind of make this a little bit of a dialogue. So let's fire up. All right here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of talk a little bit about how to approach training. And this is all about creating a training plan. It's dynamic. This is not something that you just kind of, it's not like the Ronco turkey, right? You don't set it and forget it. This is something that as a coach and even as an athlete that I really want people to understand that this is about being adaptable, about being flexible, and really kind of having an open mind when it comes to training, because we always set ourselves up with these huge goals and then we can kind of fall short. And then it's like, what do I do with this training plan that I created in January and February?
Right. I was going to say one of the biggest things is also learning to be realistic.
Yeah.
And making realistic goals.
Absolutely. We'll go do a little bit of a last cycle review. 5 pillars of training, some periodization. We'll give you guys some insight on some workouts, and then talk a little about modifications. What do you do when you get sick? How do we work through kind of some of the tough parts of training when things aren't going well and kind of go a little sideways? How do we get back on track? So, cool. So from an approach standpoint, like I mentioned, follow a system and then stick to it. And to me, a system really feels like a rhythm. It's about kind of giving your body something that, Tuesdays are this, Fridays are this, because I try to go to bed at the same time. I try to wake up around the same time. Our bodies love rhythm. It's something that they kind of crave. So being able to kind of give them a rhythm is something that's really, really key to your success, because your body's going to start to know when it's recovering and then when it needs to be ready to perform. Be goal oriented. So I'll kind of encourage you guys right now, if you're using this as kind of a step-by-step to build your training plan, write down those major goals. Pause the video right now and, figure out what your goals are, and kind of write those down. Make sure you've got the dates and the distances, and we'll kind of, use those later on. Be adaptable, flexible, adapt the method to you. This methodology is nothing crazy. It's nothing super new, but being able to walk through this and understand that, one day to the next, you really need to go by how you feel. Like I say here, you don't plug in at night. You're not a robot. You may set yourself up with a schedule and you have stress from work, stress from life, stress from all sorts of other stuff. And it takes a toll, and there's a huge impact when it comes with stress. And then make sure that you guys are learning from your prior mistakes. When it comes right down to it, we make mistakes all the time, and we're always learning. I can say that even after 39 marathons, I'm still learning how to run marathons really well. And I know I've got plenty more in my future, and eventually one day I'll feel like I nailed it. Maybe, probably not.
Yeah. I think it's every race you can look back and see what you could do differently. And that's good.
For sure.
That's what makes us human, helps us grow.
Absolutely. So this is another one of those points in the video here where just pause this and kind of answer these 4 questions. What went really well in that last marathon cycle? I think we always get stuck in what didn't go well. What can you contribute to that change? So why did you have success? Did you change your diet? Did you do some different things there? And then what would you change in your next cycle or race? Like, what do you want to do? And then ultimately taking the idea that, if you want to increase your mileage and things like that, how do you actually do that? Saying you want to increase your mileage and then doing it, I think are 2 different things. So take some time to kind of review your last cycle and give yourself some honest feedback about, how well you did and where you want to go in 2020. Beyond. Cool. For me, these are kind of the 5 pillars that when working with an athlete, but just as you train, whether that's in the weight room, whether that's in, you're training for a marathon, an ultra, things like that, like consistency is the number one thing. I don't know how you feel with the consistency versus, load and different things like that.
I think consistency is huge. And that's what I encourage athletes to look at, is like, even if we're not getting in the huge miles every day, how can we make sure that we're getting out every day? How are we making sure that you're not coming back from the weekend so exhausted that you're missing 3 days? How can we go into this realistic way that keeps you reliable?
Absolutely. I've always kind of had the mindset of like, do something every day towards your goal, even if that means resting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely in there. I'm a big fan of variation. I hate doing the same workouts. If I literally followed like a Jack Daniels plan where it's like 5x800 and the next week I do 6x800, I'm going to stagnate. It's going to be boring to me. It's not motivating. I want to change my paces. I want that variation in there. And I think that, the variation in both intensity, duration, and then, really kind of being able to have something like throwing in some hills. I think as I approach training as a coach, I'm kind of finding that, you're always kind of trying to keep certain plates spinning, like long run, but being able to finish your long run quickly. That's a skill. Being able to do hills, being able to even just go out and keep your heart rate low for a workout. It's a skill to be able to kind of do those things. And that's a part of training. From the ultra marathon world, I mean, are there different parts of this?
What I do either with ultra athletes as well as maybe athletes who are feeling a little bit stagnant. And it sounds silly, but I've done it myself and I encourage it heavily, is the Friday fun run. And that's doing something that you normally don't do. Mm. So if that's running to happy hour with your friends, if that's inviting a friend who isn't much of a runner, but it's your easy day, so like you're going to have a good time, or finding a completely new trail that you haven't run before.
Yeah.
Just kind of like treating it as like the fun mix-up day.
Right.
Because otherwise miles are going to get monotonous. Because with ultra running, you're doing less workouts. You're doing a lot of time out on the roads and trails.
Well, I think part of that too is adversity. Like I don't have adversity here as a pillar, but if there was going to be a sixth pillar, it would be dealing with and understanding how to manage adversity. So if you go out on that new trail that you've never done and you have an expectation like, I want to run this hard, and then you're thrown a 600-foot climb in your face, we'll figure out how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. But it may not be where you had planned it to be, et cetera, right? So the last two here really look at rest. I'm a big rest is needed. If your body's telling you don't. It's a lot of people say the pain cave and all of that. Yeah, big eye roll from this side of the team. Like, pain cave has its time and place when you're in a workout. But if your body's not feeling it, you're only going to, further make yourself not love this sport anymore. You want to be in the game for a long time. And take rest weeks. Everybody's like, I'll skip that. And then they really dig themselves a big hole. So we'll talk more about that in periodization. And then finally here is just progression. Be of the mindset that it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
So
start slow and be patient.
Yeah, it's hard. So let's nerd out for a little bit. So when it comes to periodization, there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but from a coaching standpoint and as an athlete, this is all about progression. This is all about kind of moving the needle forward, but without moving it forward so much that we've got to take a step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back is not a great training methodology unless it's with purpose. And so really look at 2 different types of periodization here. It's kind of a 3-to-1 periodization or a 1-2-3. And then that 4th week is a rest week. And then 1-2. And then the 3rd week is a rest week. This is just looking at your training from a standpoint of a couple of different things. Most traditional athletes, if they're, high school, even on into their late 30s, early 40s, depending on your training history, you can do 3 weeks up, 1 week down. If you're really injury prone, if, you're taking this on as a later stage master's athlete, or, if you've just had an injury, it's best to add a little bit more recovery in there to be safe. Because injuries are a bummer. And as we get older, injuries take significantly longer to heal. And if you actually take a look over here at the linear versus undulating, and then kind of the principles of progression here, not all progress is linear. I think most of the time it's not linear. And then kind of thinking about an undulating progression here, we want to have more of a stair step, like we're going to see here with this progression, where we're going to build up, and then we actually are purposely going to kind of bring down volume. We're going to bring down intensity, so that we can kind of go to that next level. And I think what's really interesting here is that may mean bringing down your volume from 2 weeks ago to then go back to where you were. And then you may only take 2 weeks of buildup there in an 8-week cycle. But look at, if you're consistent with it, what could you do? And I think that's really where all of those 5 principles really come together. Any thoughts on this?
I mean, as you said before, I just want to reiterate, it is important to make sure you're actually taking those recovery weeks easy. I think a lot of athletes get nervous or will try and add in extra things or catch up from previous weeks. And
God forbid they feel good.
Yeah. Right? Hopefully you should leave that week feeling great.
Yeah. And that you've got energy. I think that, writing about like zone 2 training and some of the principles there, I think a lot of people think that if they don't feel something at the end of the workout, that they haven't worked out, that they haven't done a thing. If they don't feel some pain, if they don't feel like some acidosis or something, that they haven't made progress. And that's just the fastest way to plateau and really kind of stable yourself out. So these are kind of the action steps, kind of part of this presentation where we're going to kind of dive in. So after we have a chance to chat here, it's a good time to kind of pause and be able to kind of go through this whole process. And so if you're looking at, a race that's, months ahead of you, put that date on the calendar and start to kind of work your way back. This is actually really kind of building the foundation of where you're going with this training plan. This is built out in terms of a 3-to-1 progression where we're going to do 3 weeks up, 1 week down. And even if you end up putting some races on there, go through this part first, and then we'll kind of come back to adjusting for taper and things like that. And then what I'd like you guys to do is put a hard line dividing each group of 4 weeks. I like to think of every 4 weeks as a training block, but don't be afraid to kind of double up with some of those base building weeks. You also have to think about transition and some other pieces that kind of go with this. So we'll dive into that. So when it comes to trends and structure, this is just kind of something to think about depending on where you're going. I have marathon and road racing, but road racing could be everything from the 5K all the way on up to the marathon. And then anything that kind of goes beyond, the marathon mark for ultras and long distance. It's actually really interesting to see that this kind of falls into a reverse periodization, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. But the big difference between these two, in my experience, is that before we can really hit that highest volume over here for the ultra endurance athletes, we're going to be looking at trying to actually get you efficient in terms of building your aerobic capacity and your aerobic ability. So think of it like this: those first, 3 blocks or structures are really about taking, say, you can go out and, run 9:30 per mile in zone 2. What does that really translate to if we got that down to 9 minutes, 8:45, 8:30 per mile, and kind of doing that work first when volume doesn't have to be huge. And then as we start to trend closer, we know we have that fitness, maintain that, and then add the volume, add the increased training stress. Because trying to run a ton of miles and then turning around and trying to do speed work, the fatigue is too much. And most athletes tend to break when they're trying to do all that. There's the exceptions, right? Your Jim Walmsley's, the dude recovers.
Yeah, he runs everything at his race pace, and no one's stopping him because he's doing awesome. So good for him, man.
Yeah, good on you, bud. But from where I'm at as a coach, working with, mostly average people and maybe a handful of above average and elite, we really have to be conscious of how much training stress. And that for me is why I use Training Peaks. It's a big reason because I can look at it. I can see it. I can see how your workouts are actually, affecting you. And then how does it affect future training? Where are we going? And I think that's the biggest part of planning your training is where are you going? Be specific. Know what your goals are. Know what specific things you need. And so this is all about number 4 here on the ultra side is skill development. Like being able to do those long climbs, do extensive work in your long runs. And what I mean by extensive work is go out and do those tempos, test your nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Leadville last year, I mean, I'm sure you could go back and say, wish I would have tested my nutrition more, right?
Sure do.
Right. And we all have those. I had a marathon where I was like, I've got this. I can go and run this. And the night before, I sacrificed 6 months of training because I didn't eat enough calories. Like, we all make the mistakes, but it's like, that's still a part of the structure here. When I think specific endurance, I think talk about and plan out your pre-long run, your pre-race meal, so you have that dialed in.
Mm-hmm. And it is the food that we're eating 2 days before a race too, which I think is always important to mention. Like, that's going to be your most important meal. So like, start getting in the habit of making those good meals and seeing what works well for you, where you have the most energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just know, like, you will only know that if you're tracking it and you're writing it down.
Right.
A training plan is one thing, but a diary, a log, super important.
I think it's always worth investing in a paper one.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, but
everyone's different. If you have a coach, it's good to be able to make that actually a part of your dialogue with your coach. I think even if that person's not a nutritionist, I'm not a nutritionist, you're not a nutritionist, but let's talk about, why was that successful? And, being able to kind of break down those pieces and having a partner in your training is really where I see the coach fitting best.
Absolutely.
Coaching is a dialogue, right? Cool. So let's talk structure a little bit. I'll kind of divert to you in terms of the mountain and ultra training, but kind of from a marathon perspective, road racing perspective, what does the training need? Is it the ability to, run at a lower heart rate for that marathon goal pace that you have? I don't think it's worth going in and just saying, I want to Boston qualify. Know a goal time and run your paces with that goal time in mind. And I think if you're finding that halfway through training that pace is too hard, or you're trying to do too much volume at it and you can't get through the whole workout of that, be willing to pull back a little bit and know that it may not be this time, but it's the next time you go out that you'll see that success, that next race. So maybe 2 marathons away and 2 full cycles away, then it may not happen in the spring, but if you've got that fitness, you can carry into the fall. Some really good stuff. So from a structure perspective, let's start to kind of build those blocks from number 1 is, and we'll hop back there for just a second. Take these blocks and actually start to kind of build them in. By majority, it's going to start with base work, but from from a mountain ultra perspective, like where do you see, the best workouts and the big stuff kind of happening? I think everybody wants to talk about the big stuff.
Right. I think it's, you're going to start with the time on feet and building up your miles, getting in that. And I like to set up the habit of knowing what days you're going to do what workout. So if you're going to be doing back-to-back long runs, even if there's shorter miles in the beginning, like you're doing 2 6-milers back-to-back, that's not really a quote-unquote long run, but it's going to get us in the habit for it. So it's going to be kind of training our body to get used to running 6 days a week if we haven't been doing that. And then also spending time going uphill, starting to increase your vert per week. I like to break it up. So first it's 1 week of higher miles, the next week it's more climbing, and then gradually merging the two, but so we're not fatiguing too much early on.
Yeah, it breaks the monotony too. If every day you're like, oh, I'm going to go uphill.
Right.
I mean, give yourself a break. Go run fast every once in a while. And I think that's part of the adaptability part of this whole thing is that doesn't mean that all speed workouts go away. That doesn't mean that all fast running goes away. It's just make sure that the majority of your training is specific to where you want to go.
Absolutely.
You got to balance those plates like we talked about earlier. I think one of the big things here is being able to double up. Do 2 blocks of base training. Do 2 blocks of, climbing or efficiency work or speed work if it's a weakness on your part. But I would definitely say that there still needs to be some sort of trending there, that you don't want to go and, start off, the second week of your training for the marathon, do an 8x800. Build a base. Don't, do maybe some progression work where you do the first half easy, the second half faster. Get into some hills, start really applying an interval type structure. build the base of also your musculature to handle that powerful output. If your body's not ready to handle an eccentric hamstring contraction, the first time you go to run speed workout, if you haven't done hills, your hamstrings are going to really feel it. So build your body, to be the specific machine that you want. All right. So this one I love. This is kind of the weekly rhythms. And this is just kind of a general thing. I personally think that Tuesdays and Fridays tend to be great for workouts, just from the standpoint that Monday is always so busy that if you can just get out for a run, sometimes that's a total win. Tuesdays tend to calm down a little bit, good for getting a workout in. And then Fridays, that workload's usually a little bit lighter. You can kind of fit a workout in a little bit better, maybe show up to work a little bit later, however that usually worked for you guys. But it's kind of nice to fit those in there. When you're only at 4 days a week, that workout fits best in the middle of the week, so you've got enough recovery. But I mean, I'm probably gonna catch some shade for this, but running 3 days a week, it's hard to really say that that's consistent, because that's still not even every other day. So it's hard for me to say that, you unless you're fitting in other aerobic work in there, and we're talking about multi-sport athletes or things like that. Yeah. If you're working for an hour and a half in the gym doing weights 3 days a week, maybe a good supplement. But if you're training for a big event, especially if it's anything over the marathon, you're going to need at least 4 days just to get the minimum aerobic requirements. So as we look at the 4, 5, 6 days a week, 7 days a week that's out here, this is really where you're starting to see how it all fits in. The aerobic components here, because we might have a workout on Tuesday, a workout Friday, and then the Sunday, that long run might end up in a progression. It may end somewhere in terms of fast finish or a specific endurance run. You need that aerobic work to recover. And I think that's where people really miss out, is that you can still recover in an easy run. It has to be easy though. And I'll put it out there that if you're training for an ultra, that might mean a hike. That might mean walking. That might mean walking the uphills because your heart rate's getting too high because you're toasted from your workout the day before.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the Sunday hike.
Yeah.
And ultra training.
Yeah, don't carry your ego up that hill with you, right? Just saying. So action step number 3 here is kind of looking at that 3 weeks of build, 1 week of recovery. This is really kind of how it looks. If you're handwriting this in an Excel sheet, I think this is really one of the best ways to look at it. Is you have your weekly rhythm of aerobic, workout, aerobic, workout, recovery, long run. And then it's build 1, build 2, build 3 as we go down in green blocks. And then you enter a recovery week. And I could put workouts in here and show an increasing mileage every week. But I think this really kind of gives the idea of what we're really trying to do. That's one block right there. You could focus on hills. You could focus on speed. You could focus on any of those things. But don't every single day change it up to be it's a this or that and this or that. You'll be kind of a Swiss Army knife. You do want to come to a point at some point, right? Yeah. So in terms of workouts here, I really want to kind of send out some reminders that you do need to prepare for workouts. Just showing up, your body's not ready. You're a big fan of actually, kind of doing some, maybe not always the dynamic stuff, but you do some stuff to kind of get warmed up.
Yeah, there's some, I like sun salutations, or there's a pre-run yoga routine I really enjoy, especially on the cold days where I'm not going to be excited to go outside and do dynamics. Yeah, where I can kind of drink my coffee and warm up and then get out the door for my jogging warm up.
Your jogging warm up. I think when it's chilly and it's cold, and that's where, of course, we're recording this in February. So
it's chilly and cold.
It's chilly and cold right now. So we're really looking at how do we kind of optimize and make this as an enjoyable experience. And one last thing I'll put in here is that if you're using an app like Training Peaks, or you're using, really any type of training plan here, and it says, do this at 10K pace, do this at 5K pace. set your zones. Actually go to the treadmill and run a 5K fitness test. Go see what you can run for 5K and call that your 5K test.
And there is almost in all of America, there is a 5K or 10K any weekend.
Any weekend.
Sometimes that's a fun way to test.
Yeah,
as well.
right.
I mean, you're not supposed to test running with other people, but it makes it more fun.
Anyways, right?
Yeah.
You're going to push yourself probably harder in a race than you would on your treadmill at the rec center. Right. Let's be honest. So once you have those set, you can actually go and look and see with there's a ton of different running pace calculators out there. Jack Daniels, I know Active had one there for a while. And go kind of see how those paces break up in terms of training paces and use those to train with. And if you're feeling like those paces are getting easy, retest and make that one of your workouts in the week. Don't make that a fourth workout or a third workout in your week. Make that one of your workouts. So if you want to say, hey, it'd be probably smart to test myself every 6 to 8 weeks, I'll give you guys a little hint, that might be something to put as your second workout in your rest week when you're recovered, when you're actually able to, perform really well versus that second workout in your third week of build. Probably not gonna feel so hot for that and probably not gonna be an accurate reflection of your current fitness. So pro tips. Cool. So we're gonna kind of dive into here some workouts. I'm not gonna go through every single workout and explain why. And these can all be modified. It can be more time, it can be less rest. I'll just kind of give from the top of this as I look at workouts. We're moving always from general to specific or easy to hard as it's explained here in terms of the running blocks. But you can, 8 by 40 seconds that next week, if you've got 2 weeks of trying to do some aerobic threshold work, go to 8 by 50 seconds, add in kind of, don't make these huge jumps that you have to do 30 seconds every time to get to 3 minutes, because 3 minutes is what you did that one time and you got that one result. No one workout defines your success. It's the culmination of the work. Go back to that consistency word. So in terms of building block, this is the biggest one of pretty much any training cycle. That's just the aerobic stuff. Only note I'll make here, double runs, they really only make sense when you're over 60 miles per week, because otherwise going out and doing, a 2-mile run and then a 4-mile run in the evening, just go out for 6, man.
Unless you have to do it for work.
Yeah, just get up earlier. Just, or make that time. It's really going out for 2 miles. You're just doing extra laundry, right? I say that if you're going to go out for a run, it needs to be at least 20 minutes for you to get an aerobic training effect out of it. So 2 miles for most people is just going to be on the edge of 20 minutes. So not saying it's not worth it. If that's all the time you have that day, get your 2 miles in. But if you're really training for something and you're trying to say, I'm going to carve time out of my day, at least 2. So here's some great hill workouts to, kind of consider as you're building this out here. Short and intense, 5K to mile effort. You'll notice that the easy intro workouts are all based on effort. As you move down, we start to think half marathon pace, and this is even for ultra. Knowing where those paces are is super helpful and important. It gives you guidelines instead of just easy, hard, right? Stick to something, give yourself some structure. Anything to add on hills?
If you are training for an ultra, especially when at high elevation and perhaps are doing hill workouts at a higher elevation, do know where your zones are, but base more on heart rate than on pace, because you are going to be running slower.
Yeah, 8 minutes at 10,000 feet is...
It turns into 9 minutes at 10,000 feet.
Or 10.
Yeah.
Or 12. And if that grade goes
as
up...
evidenced by my last hill workout at 10,000 feet.
So if you're an ultra runner listening to this or checking this out, long, steep climbs, to me, that's more specific endurance work. You're not going to go out and do, 3 by 10 minutes. In this section, this is kind of the beginning. This is that, really that's that first intro to speed work. I consider hills to be intro to speed work. Mm-hmm. And if it's junky out, but you have a nice clean hill, there's your speed workout. There's your high aerobic work.
That's what Frank Shorter said. He'll work his speed work in disguise.
Amen. So this is aerobic support threshold work. And really these easy intro workouts, you can really throw a lot of different stuff in there. I've thrown threshold work like, 12 minutes continuous and things like that, 20 to 24 minutes at tempo into some of this aerobic support work. I'm not a huge zone 3 fan. I'm kind of like, if you're going to go do the work, go do the work. So I'm a big preacher for intervals, but there's definitely something to be said for going out and holding your goal marathon pace from a just confidence perspective, knowing, hey, I can hold that for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But beyond that, really, I would say if you're going more than 30 minutes in a workout, maybe consider adding that chunk of pace into your long run instead, and seeing if there's other work you can do in the middle of the week so that your workouts aren't going 90 plus minutes in the week. Do it when you've got a little more time. Hard workouts here, man, 3x5K. It's a hard workout. It's a standard amongst a lot of marathon trainers, but even then, it's not a bad workout for ultra if you know what your that marathon pace or what's that equivalent heart rate, and just kind of going and nailing that maybe over some rolling terrain and just doing some of that harder high aerobic work and staying in it mentally for 15K. That's a workout in and of itself. So some things to consider and kind of some other thoughts around speed work. Speed work is, everybody thinks I need speed. And, none of these workouts here are actually what I would consider to be true speed work. Where we're talking about doing 100 or 200 meters on 4 minutes, 5 minutes rest, or talking alactic. This is under the kind of the guise and structure of distance speed workouts. 10K to 5K pace, we're not producing such high levels of lactate that we're really having to dump a lot of lactate and really, rebuild those metabolic structures. This is more of being able to get your leg speed and your efficiency. I don't know how you feel about speed work for ultra runners.
I think it's incredibly important early on in the cycle, as we talked about.
Yeah.
I think occasionally it's nice to have an easier week where you do a little bit more speed focus.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just lose it.
Yeah. And
that's a bummer. We don't want to become the slow ultra runner who has that weird hunch and is just wandering around in the hills, and you see them out there.
They're out there.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to speed work, efficiency is such a huge factor that people leave out of consideration for even 100 miles. Being able to be an efficient runner also means that you're probably a fast runner. Fast runners run efficiently. When you've got poor mechanics, it affects everything. And when you take such a timeline like 100 miles, an efficiency increase of 3% can really add up in 24, 26, 28 hours. So just something to consider for you guys on the outside there that are like, I'm doing 100 miles, dude. Do I really need to do 400s? Do I really need to do 800s?
Not every week, but yeah.
No, throw it in every once in a while. But I would say that start so easy. Please start easy with this stuff. I can't stress that enough. 400s, that might be plenty to start with. Don't do 12. Don't do 20. Like, start at 4, 6, 8, somewhere in that range if you've got some experience. And don't consider your experience what you did in high school. I'm talking in the last 3 years. So really try to be smart with, what's your body adapted to. If you haven't done a speed workout in a while, go to your nearest hill. Start there. 2 weeks of that, then go into speed, if not longer on the hill. Just some considerations. Some specific endurance workouts. These might be one of my favorite secret weapons for really building strong and confident marathoners and ultra marathoners, because the two things under the rules that live over there are develop a nutrition plan and develop a hydration plan, and know what your body is telling you. If there's a third thing here, is know your body's dialogue for these kind of runs. I mean, if you think about, 2 hours easy, and then you mix in at the end of that 3 by 10 minutes at marathon goal pace, that's a doozy. I mean, that's hard even for an ultra runner to fit in there. And if you can go in there with the mindset that you're going to have to take really good nutrition for the first 2 hours so you can perform later, this is really about training miles 20 through 26 of the marathon, or miles 30 through 50, and being able to know how do you change and adapt to those kind of things. And all of this can be changed depending on whether you're doing a 50-mile race, 100-mile race, 100K. All that fits in there. But you got to know what you're going into. I think the big final closeout on this is total load. Looking at, this is 30 minutes easy and then 3 by 10 minutes at goal pace. They look like the exact same workout, but boy, is this one completely different. Another 90 minutes of easy running is going to do a number on the legs. Last bit here is actually some training modifications for people to kind of consider and to look at. Sick days, lost days, missed workouts. It might be a little hard to see on the right-hand side there. But one thing to really look at here is going to be some fatigue, stomach problems, chronic injury. If you hit a plateau, what are some of these modifications? How do we change that? And I'm actually going to toss that over to you for a little bit here, Lexi.
So this is more, that chart is more what goes wrong in your last race, not so much modifications.
Sure.
So if in your last race you dealt with some fatigue and or in your last training cycle, you were just getting too burned out beyond what you should feel for training for an endurance event, because there's some fatigue, is just starting out slow, making sure you're only increasing either, if you're going by mileage or duration, you're only increasing that 10% each week. Even if you're feeling amazing, don't jump up too fast. If you're having stomach problems, as we mentioned before, practice. Treat your long runs like a dress rehearsal. I think it's always important to look up what will be at aid stations with that whole, don't try anything new on race day.
You're right.
Look up to see what they'll be serving for hydration, what they'll be serving for snacks in case you run out of your own. If you dealt with chronic injury in your previous training cycles, it might be time to start looking at integrating strength training. That's going to be something that in your off season, you can really work on building up muscle and making sure that you have a good balance. As runners, we tend to be pretty unbalanced humans with, strong quads, weak glutes, which lead to hip issues. So making sure that you have a full balance there. If it's during your training cycle, looking at more maintaining those body weight workouts.
Band workouts.
Yeah, band workouts are amazing. Going to yoga, Pilates, anything that will just kind of help you maintain.
Right on.
And then finally, if you feel like you've hit a plateau in your past few training cycles, you're not really improving much, as we talked about, that might be time to look at variety. If you're just doing long, slow runs time after time and not improving, throwing in some speed and some tempo, some threshold work. If you feel like maybe you're doing everything at race pace, practicing that 80-20 method. So 80% of your runs done at 80% of threshold, 20% are going to be those higher intensity days.
I think a big thing that when it comes to getting people out of that plateau is I find that when athletes have success using one thing, they then go back and they do that thing over and over and over again. They may even do the same plan with the same workouts every single time. And it's like, what got you there won't get you where you want to go. And so I think, one, if you're really stuck and you've tried different plans and you're just not getting where you want to go, that's where a coach fits. I think that's where the one-to-one coaching can be such a huge thing. But even as far as like our curated coaching program, both of those fit really well for someone that's looking for some, looking for structure, looking for some advice, a community, and all those things. All of that lives in there. So beyond just creating a really amazing training plan for yourself, we have community. We have a lot of other things that I think are also on the table for any athlete that's kind of on the outside looking in. If you're frustrated with this program or things like that, in terms of, you get into this, you're like, all right, I just want someone to handle this for me. There's a lot of, giving up some freedoms there, but definitely it's freeing to sometimes have somebody just handle your training for you.
And maybe looking at if, a coach isn't really in your budget, also looking at joining a running group or joining people for there's always Speedworks, the Harriers are a popular group. And that might kind of help you do some different workouts that you haven't tried before.
Absolutely. And then I'll make two notes here. In terms of sick days, if you have a fever, don't run. If it's a head cold, a cough, things like that, no major workouts, especially if it's anything in your chest, you're just going to end up scarring your throat, coughing really hard, not fun. Always go back to low aerobic work first if you're coming back from an injury, a lot of stress, being sick. Start with the easy runs, and then after you've had a couple successful runs, move into the harder stuff. Go back into that. And the last thing I'll say is that if you missed a workout, you lost a day, don't make up workouts. Go back again. Go get that aerobic mileage in, and then go back to trying to get back into your rhythm as soon as you can. So even if you missed the day before and the next day is supposed to be a workout, you're just not feeling it, it's okay. Try to get that second workout of the week or whatever. It's just kind of a good way to kind of move those things forward. So that kind of closes things out as far as kind of building a training plan at this point. If you've got the structure and you've got all of the other bits and pieces in there, I think the only thing that hasn't been listed here is talking about, making those adjustments for multiple events inside a training plan, and really just making sure that you're not doing a whole bunch of loading right up towards an A race. And be honest with yourself. If you've got 2 A races in 3 weeks, are those really both A races? There's definitely some consideration there. But what I'll say to you guys with that is we will be coming back to that and talking about some of those different modifications. If you have questions, if this inspired some thoughts, some comments, share those in the comments below, or feel free to shoot us any of those questions. The email there is coaches@lifelongendurance.com. And for now, that's the end of this presentation. And we'll look forward to seeing your questions. All right. Let's fire up, see if anybody else is on here. I want to stop sharing this and see if we have anybody else. So lonely.
No one joined us.
So lonely. That's the way that goes. Maybe we'll stop the recording, but keep things open here for another 10 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
See what's kicking there?
Yeah.
All right.